World War I, a conflict so devastating it was initially dubbed the Great War, stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of unchecked ambition and miscalculation. It earned the grim moniker the Empire's final gamble because it represented a desperate and ultimately fatal attempt by Europe's aging empires to cling to power in a rapidly changing world. These empires, drunk on past glories and blinded by nationalism, believed that war would solidify their dominance. Instead, it shattered their foundations, reshaping the political landscape and, well, ushering in a new era of global uncertainty. At the dawn of the 20th century, Europe was a powder keg of imperial rivalry, nationalistic fervor, and simmering resentment. Vast empires like those of Britain, Germany, Russia, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Turks competed for global influence and control. Each empire believed its own culture and way of life to be superior, fueling a dangerous sense of competition. Within these empires, different ethnic groups clamored for independence, creating internal tensions that threatened to erupt. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo on the 28th of June 1914 provided the spark that ignited this volatile mix. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne in Sarajevo by a young Serbian nationalist, was more than just a tragic event. It was the match that set the world ablaze. The news of his death sent shockwaves through the capitals of Europe, igniting fear, anger, and uncertainty. In the tense atmosphere of early 20th century Europe, where old empires jostled for power and new nations sought recognition, this single act of violence became the catalyst for a much larger conflict. Austria-Hungary, determined to crush what it saw as Serbian defiance and to reassert its dominance over the Balkans, issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia. The empire's leaders believed that a swift, decisive response would strengthen their fragile hold on power and deter further unrest within their diverse territories. Serbia, however, could not accept all the demands. Backed by Russia, which saw itself as the protector of Slavic peoples, Serbia refused to comply fully. The world watched as tensions escalated and the threat of war loomed ever larger. Decades of diplomatic maneuvering had created a tangled web of alliances and treaties. These agreements, meant to preserve peace, now pulled one nation after another into the growing crisis as each country honored its commitments and prepared for conflict. Germany, bound by its alliance to Austria-Hungary, quickly declared war on Russia and soon after on Russia's ally France. The machinery of war, once set in motion, was impossible to stop. Leaders and citizens alike braced for the unknown. In a bold and controversial move, Germany invaded neutral Belgium, hoping to outflank French defences and secure a swift victory. This violation of Belgian neutrality outraged the world and brought Great Britain, bound by treaty and public opinion, into the conflict. Within just a few weeks, the great powers of Europe, once bound by diplomacy and trade, were now locked in a brutal struggle for survival. The world would never be the same again as the First World War erupted with unprecedented ferocity. Most nations, blinded by national pride and a belief in their own military superiority, marched to war in 1914 with a sense of naive optimism. They envisioned a short, decisive conflict with their armies home by Christmas. Generals, still clinging to outdated tactics of massed infantry charges, failed to grasp the impact of modern weaponry on the battlefield. This belief in a swift victory would prove to be a tragic miscalculation, costing millions of lives. The reality of World War I was, honestly, a far cry from the glorious campaigns envisioned by armchair generals. Instead of swift victories and heroic charges, soldiers found themselves trapped in a nightmare landscape where mud, blood, and chaos reigned supreme. The dreams of quick triumphs faded almost instantly, replaced by the grim truth of industrialized warfare. The conflict quickly bogged down into a brutal war of attrition, characterized by the horrors of trench warfare. Soldiers dug deep into the earth, carving out a fragile existence in narrow, waterlogged trenches that stretched for miles. These trenches became both their shelter and their prison, offering little protection from the relentless violence above. On the Western Front, a 400-mile network of trenches snaked across France and Belgium, separating the warring armies. This vast labyrinth of mud and barbed wire created a static front where movement was measured in feet rather than miles. The land between the trenches, known as no man's land, was a desolate wasteland scarred by shell craters and littered with the remnants of failed offensives. Soldiers on both sides endured unimaginable conditions, living in constant fear of artillery bombardments, sniper fire, and poison gas attacks. The mud was so deep it could swallow a man whole, and the ever-present threat of disease made every day a struggle for survival. Rats, lice, and the stench of death were constant companions, eroding morale and hope. New technologies like the machine gun, the tank, and poison gas made the battlefields deadlier than ever before, shattering bodies and poisoning the very air. The introduction of these weapons transformed the nature of combat, making traditional tactics obsolete and turning every advance into a deadly gamble. Advances were measured in yards, often gained at a horrific cost in human life. Every inch of ground was paid for with blood, and the landscape itself became a testament to the futility and devastation of modern war. For those who survived, the memories of mud, blood, and loss would haunt them for the rest of their lives. World War I was not confined to the battlefields of Europe. It was a total war that, frankly, engulfed entire societies, impacting the lives of millions of civilians. Governments mobilized their economies for war production, diverting resources away from essential goods. Women stepped into factories and shipyards, taking on roles traditionally held by men. Food shortages and rationing became commonplace, forcing families to adapt to a new reality of scarcity. Propaganda, designed to boost morale and demonize the enemy, permeated every aspect of life. Children collected scrap metal for the war effort, while their mothers knitted socks for soldiers on the front lines. By the time the guns finally fell silent on the 11th of November 1918, the world had been, well, irrevocably transformed. The end of World War I marked not just the conclusion of a brutal conflict, but the dawn of a new and uncertain era. Across Europe and beyond, people emerged from the shadows of war, their lives and landscapes forever altered. The relief of peace was tempered by the staggering cost of victory and the deep scars left behind. The war left an estimated 40 million people dead, including 9 million soldiers and 7 million civilians. Entire towns were reduced to rubble, and families were torn apart by loss. The scale of devastation was unprecedented, with millions more wounded, displaced, or left to grieve. The psychological trauma of trench warfare and the horrors of modern weaponry haunted survivors for decades. Empires crumbled, new nations emerged, and the old world order lay in ruins. The collapse of centuries-old dynasties created a power vacuum, and the political map of Europe was redrawn almost overnight. Borders shifted, and the hopes of self-determination clashed with the realities of ethnic and national rivalries. The Treaty of Versailles, intended to ensure lasting peace, instead sowed the seeds of future conflict. Its harsh terms, particularly toward Germany, were met with anger and humiliation. Many believed the treaty failed to address the root causes of the war and instead created new grievances that would fester in the years to come. Germany, burdened by crippling reparations and blamed for the war, seethed with resentment. Economic hardship and political instability gripped the nation, fueling radical ideologies and unrest. The seeds of future turmoil were sown in the bitterness of defeat and the struggle to rebuild. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian empires collapsed, giving rise to new states and unresolved ethnic tensions. In Eastern Europe and the Middle East, borders were drawn with little regard for the people living there, leading to decades of conflict and instability. The promise of self-rule often clashed with the reality of competing nationalisms. The United States, drawn reluctantly into the conflict, emerged as a global power. Its involvement tipped the balance of the war and signaled a new era in international relations. As American soldiers returned home, the nation grappled with its newfound influence and the responsibilities that came with shaping a world forever changed by war. The echoes of World War I continue to reverberate today. Its legacy can be seen in the geopolitical map of Europe and the Middle East. It shaped the development of international institutions like the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations. Most importantly, it serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of war. and the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation in international relations. The war to end all wars, as it was, rather tragically dubbed, failed to achieve its aim. However, its lessons, if heeded, can guide us towards a more peaceful and just world.